Some are saying that they see your decision to run now as an indication that you feel that the current candidates in the field are weak and they can't get the job done. Is that accurate?
Well, let me phrase it this way. I think that there is a greater risk of having Donald Trump reelected than there was before. And in the end, I looked in the mirror and said that just cannot let this happen.
Michael Bloomberg is making a bet about democracy in 2020. He doesn't need people. He only needs bags and bags of money.
I have nothing personal against Mr. Bloomberg. I really don't. But what does disturb me is the arrogance of the billionaire class.
Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders reacting to former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg's entrance into the presidential race. Bloomberg made his first campaign stop in Norfolk, Virginia yesterday. Meanwhile, for the first time in decades, it is a four-way race in New Hampshire. The latest Suffolk University Boston Globe poll shows Senator Bernie Sanders at 16%, Senator Elizabeth Warren at 14%, Mayor Pete Buttigieg at 13%. He's up 8 points since August, and former Vice President Joe Biden at 12%. He is down 9 points since August. This is essentially a statistical tie with all four candidates sitting in the polls, margin of error of more than 4 points. The support for Senator Sanders appears to be much more solid than the others. 64% of his supporters say their mind is firmly made up. Biden is the next closest in that regard with 37%. Let's bring in Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of The Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson and political reporter for the Boston Globe, James Pindell. Guys, good morning. James, let me start with you because this is up in your neck of the woods. What do you see in that poll that maybe the rest of us haven't seen yet, which is that Mayor Pete Buttigieg flying up at 8%, up 8 points since the last poll, and Vice President Biden down 9 points. There was that poll last week up in New Hampshire that showed Mayor Buttigieg with a lead. Some said the sampling of that poll, the group, the highly educated white voters, gave him an edge that perhaps inflated his numbers. But here he is tied for the lead.
Yeah, there's a broader point and then a granular point. The broader point is that for so long, many, including myself, thought that New Hampshire would eventually just come down to this progressive grudge match between two neighboring senators of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who, of course, won the 2016 primary. And then Joe Biden comes in the race, obviously floating above it, immediately becomes the front runner. But now what we're seeing is the most complicated scenario in New Hampshire that we have all cycle. And as I wrote and as you quoted, we've never had this many candidates clustered at the very top, this close to the New Hampshire primary in decades. And so while a lot of people are looking at Iowa, that's clearly where a lot of the candidates thought this is going to be a make or break contest for them. And they thought New Hampshire would just be this Warren and Bernie contest. I think this poll in particular is going to change the narrative a little bit and force other campaigns to say, wait a minute, what's actually happening here in New Hampshire? And remember the top number there, 16%. Anything can happen in terms of a candidate who's down at 2 or 4, like Andrew Yang. And the number of undecideds are at 21%, and 53% haven't even decided on a final candidate yet.
So,
and then, I'm sorry, the smaller point, to answer your question, the smaller point would be the one thing to look in this poll are older voters. It's fascinating. From one poll, our last poll, to this poll, older voters have been fleeing Joe Biden. That's why he dropped to fourth place. He dropped 9 points among older voters. And meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg is the one who's gaining. He gained 7 points among those older voters. So right now, they're the subgroup that's moving the most right now in the Granite State.
Yeah, Mike, isn't that interesting that Mayor Buttigieg leads the field with 22% support among voters 56 to 65 years old? So the young mayor from South Bend, Indiana, is the most popular with older voters in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and clearly his jump up 8 points since the last poll, it's at Joe Biden's expense. You know, there's an old aphorism in politics, and it began with Eugene McCarthy's campaign in 1968 in New Hampshire, that old people like young people. I mean, they just do. They're drawn to younger.
That's why you like Willie.
That's exactly right.
Boy, again, if I'm young, this is an old show. I'm a middle-aged man. Gene Robinson, what do you see in these numbers right here, other than the fact that this race is completely up for grabs? As, by the way, is the case in Iowa, too. You've got a cluster of four candidates at the top of the polls there. What do you see in these New Hampshire numbers?
Well, I see what you saw. I see a race that is completely up for grabs. I see a primary contest through the first at least two contests and maybe the first three, if you count Nevada, that's totally fluid, that could go any way. And then you get to South Carolina, and maybe Joe Biden still has a firewall there, and because of his support with African-American voters, and at that point, we'll see. But this is, we could be in a few months after this first set of primaries, we could be looking toward Super Tuesday and hoping that we get some questions answered. This could look like a very messy, undecided race for some time through the primary season, I think, because voters clearly haven't made up their minds that there's one of these candidates or even two of these candidates that they want to finally duke it out to run against Donald Trump. It's the number of undecideds is just striking to me.
Eddie, our good friend Steve Kornacki reminds us, as this poll came out yesterday, of the same poll, Boston Globe, December 11th, 2003. Howard Dean, 42%. Right. John Kerry, 19%. Wesley Clark, 13%. Right. So obviously a long way to go in these 11 weeks.
Long way to go. It's just a picture of a particular moment. But look, I think what's interesting, particularly with the Buttigieg numbers and the Biden numbers, is that the kind of conversation we were having around the progressive side of the Democratic Party, that those votes would be split between Warren and Sanders. Yeah. We're now seeing that happen among the centrists. Right? And that is, you have Buttigieg, you have Biden, and now you have Bloomberg. So it's really interesting the way in which this ideological divide within the party, how it has taken shape up to now, and what it will look like moving forward as voters have choices within those particular camps to make. So we're in for a long ride, it seems to me.
Yeah, and already it's a factor, but it's going to become a larger factor after the holidays are over at the beginning of the new year. Which among these candidates, who can beat Donald Trump? That's going to be the fact.
And it's interesting. Like, no one has higher than 16%. The two progressives together are, 30%. The two centrists together are close to that, 25 or so percent. This is truly distributed, and it reflects the larger dynamic of the Democratic race. And, we began this block with a thing about Bloomberg. This is the scenario that he obviously benefits from, that nobody emerges. The first four primaries are a wash, and then you start moving towards Super Tuesday. And it's interesting watching his ads. Bloomberg is running less against everybody else and much more against Trump. He is the one who's framing the issue so far more than anyone else, I think, is a referendum on the incumbent and on his fitness to serve. So I actually think, I know his numbers are low and he's not in these polls, but actually this reinforces the rationale for his presidency.
All right, we're going to talk more about Mayor Bloomberg and his candidacy and his rationale after we sneak in a quick break. We'll be right back on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.